I was on a 7-day silent retreat. There were about 200 people that were there with me. And by silent retreat, I mean, we didn't talk, but our focus was on meditation. So we had meditation for about 10 hours a day. Started at 6:30 in the morning and finished up at about 9:30 at night. So when I heard that Michelle was a little under the weather and that we needed to kind of flip our sermons because she was going to preach originally today and I'm preaching next week, but because she was a little under the weather with her voice and a little laryngitis, I said it was no problem for me to not take this weekend off, but to come and to preach today. And I said this even though I did not have my sermon written. Now, if you knew me, I write my sermon on Monday, and I spend a whole day doing that. So I knew I'd get home on Friday, and that I'd have Saturday morning, really, to get it together. But I knew it wouldn't be a problem, because I'd already done a bunch of work on the sermon. I had a sense of where I was going, and I also had a feeling that this 7-day silent retreat would give me lots of stuff to talk about with you all. So we are continuing our series on the teachings of Jesus, and we believe that what Jesus taught is so practical and has so much to say to us. And the teaching we're focusing on this week is about how Jesus told people to mind their own business. He said it nicer than that, though. He said, "What is that to you?" Now, you may wonder why, if I'm at a silent retreat for a week, why I would be able to gather material at that retreat about minding your own business. Oh, my friends, let me tell you. So, turns out, when you're at a silent retreat, you're not only silent, you're focused on your meditation, you are not to make eye contact with other people. Because the whole time you're supposed to be focused on your own journey, what's going on in your practice of meditation. So you're not to be looking around and making eye contact. And so, you know, they told us this several times, because as you can imagine, it was pretty hard to do. But I will tell you, even though you're working to minimize distractions, you're working to focus on yourself, you're working to look at your own journey, it is hard. And one of the things that makes it so hard is that when you're sitting there and you're looking at all the people, you have some judgy thoughts. For example, one of the judgy thoughts I had, they told us there are 3 ways you can do meditation. You can sit, you can stand, or you can lie down. Upon hearing this, the woman next to me rolls out her yoga mat and her blanket and her pillow and lies down. And I'm thinking to myself, that is a nap. That is not meditation. Turns out I was not the only one who was having all these judgy thoughts. This is actually one of the things that happens to you when you go away and are silent. You get all these judgy thoughts about everyone, and they actually put out a bowl and said, write down the judgy thoughts you're having, and we're going to compile a list. So about 2/3 of the way through the week, they read the list to us, and it was, I have never laughed that hard. There were lots of judgments about what people wore, right? Just like regular life. What people wore. Did they have the same outfit every day? Were they sleeping in that outfit? Or did they have a new outfit every day? Were people doing their hair? Did people look presentable, or did they look like they just rolled out of bed, right? That was one of the big judgments. Another big judgment was around, and this is very unique for this situation, the cushion you were sitting on. Now, I sit on a chair, but a lot of people have cushions, and I guess there's a hierarchy of cushions. There's some cushions that are like super plush and beautiful. Then there's other cushions that are, more like Walmart cushions. So people sent in their judgments about the different cushions people had. But my favorite judgment was that people had water bottles that were too loud when they unscrewed the lid. And after this, we were actually told, if you're one of those people with the loud water bottle, please do not unscrew it during meditation. People are having trouble focusing. So here's the thing. This is human nature, isn't it? It's human nature that we compare, that we judge, that we even envy the people around us. But as this was not my first rodeo in dealing with having judgy thoughts, I thought, what is it that I already know that helps me when I fall into a situation with judgment? And what I had to help me is what I'm going to teach you about today. Because Jesus had some very specific ideas about our judgments of each other, our comparisons of each other, our envy of each other, and what that does in our lives. This is very practical stuff today. Super practical. You'll be able to apply it, like Michelle said, right after church, maybe at coffee time. Certainly, by the time you have dinner tonight, you will have had the opportunity to apply what we're going to talk about today. Because I believe that when we know what Jesus taught, our lives are better, they're richer, they're more full, they're more beautiful. That's how practical what he taught is. So we're going to hear our main text this morning, but let me set it up for us. This is a text that occurs right after the resurrection. The disciples are a little bit in chaos, and they decide that they're going to go back to their professions, which were being fishermen, and so they go back to fish. Jesus shows up and beckons them to shore, and they have breakfast together. And then there is this exchange, which is what we're going to hear, between Jesus and Peter. So Mike is going to read for us John 21, 15 through 23.
Is it too soon to send my 5 and 7-year-old to this 7-day silent retreat? Don't judge. Back to the scripture. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, "Follow me." Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them. He was the one who had reclined next to Jesus at the supper and had said, "Lord, who is it that is going to betray you?" When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, "Lord, what about him?" Jesus said to him, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? Follow me." So the rumor spread in the community that this disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die, but it is my will that he remain until I come. What is it to you? This is the word of the Lord for the people of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Okay, so our text starts off with this exchange between Jesus and Peter. Now, Peter, before the crucifixion, had denied Jesus 3 times. So in this text, which kind of mirrors that, Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" 3 times. So Peter has this forgiveness opportunity. He's been able to say, "Yes, Lord, I love you. Yes, Lord, I love you." And so there's this beautiful mirroring, denial and now love, that cancels out that denial. And then the second part of the text is a kind of curious part where it talks about what will happen to Peter as he would die. And so Jesus basically lets him know that this love that he has for Jesus will cause him to be killed. And in fact, the tradition is that Peter was crucified, but feeling unworthy to be crucified like Jesus was, he was crucified upside down. So we have this forgiveness, we have this sense of what will happen. Jesus tells him what will happen, and then Jesus calls him and says, "Follow me." So it's this beautiful moment in Peter's life, right? He's received this forgiveness and this call in his life. And it's like he kind of goes, yeah, Jesus. But what about that guy? What about that other disciple? What's going to happen to him? Now, this disciple that he's all upset about is John. And John and Peter have this rivalry. So at this great moment in Peter's life where Jesus has proclaimed all these amazing things, what happens? He's all focused not on himself and his call. He's focused on what's going to happen to that guy. Is he going to get better than me? Am I going to get better than him? Have you ever had a rival like that? Someone who you're comparing yourself against, seeing if they get more than you, more money, more accolades, more whatever. It usually starts when we're kids with our siblings. They're your rival. You feel they get more from mom. They get more of dad's attention. You're comparing. Sometimes you might find yourself in this situation if you're hired with somebody else. I remember when I was in high school, I worked at McDonald's, and I was hired with a whole group of people, and you could bet I was sure looking to see if they were progressing up the ladder of McDonald's success as fast as I was. I also, this week when I was on retreat, it turned out that there was another United Methodist pastor there. I didn't know him, but I met him on the shuttle as we went to the retreat center. His name is Andy, and he is the pastor of a mega church in Dallas, Texas, United Methodist Church. And I will admit to you that there were times during the week when I was meditating, and I would wonder if Andy was meditating. And Andy was just down the aisle from me, so I would open an eye, I would look over. Were his eyes closed? They were, every time. I think he's way better than I am at any of this stuff. Comparing ourselves is just a regular thing of life, right? It's as ancient as time, this being envious of others, looking to see how we fit in the hierarchy. The Bible starts out with the story of it, right? The story of Cain and Abel. The story of Cain and Abel is about 2 brothers. The sacrifice of Cain, his offering to God, isn't received as well as the sacrifice of Abel. And so Cain's response to this competition is like the worst response ever, right? He kills his brother. There's other stories in the Bible of competition, the story of Jacob and Esau. Jacob is born second, and that means that Esau should get the birthright and everything that goes with it. But Jacob's a little conniver, and he steals it from Esau, and then the two of them really are disconnected for much of the rest of the story. So competition, seeing how you fit in the hierarchy, looking around to see if people are getting more than you, is an ancient thing. Back to today's text. Today's text, we have Peter getting this forgiveness, getting this call in his life, and his response is to say, well, that's fine, but what's that guy going to get? Is he going to get better than me? Let me give you a little backstory so you can see the context between these two guys. So we'll look at another scripture. So previously on the Gospel of John, just the text right before, one chapter before, is the story of the resurrection. And I'm going to read this. What I want you to listen for are the two men in the story and what's going on between them. One is unnamed, but he's referred to as the disciple that Jesus loved. And then Peter, Simon Peter, is the other one. So let me read it. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran, and she went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went to the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in, and he saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he didn't go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went to the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture, that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. So let me give you a little background on the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John was written by, historically we understand, the disciple whose name is John. But in this part of the text, he does not refer to himself in first person. Instead, he gives himself a nickname that he uses. And the nickname is the disciple that Jesus loved. Because if you're going to give yourself a nickname, you should give yourself like the best nickname ever. Okay? So he calls himself the disciple that Jesus loved. So in John's gospel, John and Peter have this tension between them. Let me show you. In verse 4, it says, "The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first." So, he has to throw that part in. Not only am I the disciple that Jesus loved, I am faster. Right? He has to throw that part in. I am faster. And then the second, verse 8, it says, "Then the other disciple who reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and he believed." Now, if you are faster, you will get there first. But he has to accentuate this. Remember, I am also faster. I am the one who is loved. And I am also faster. And not only did I go in, I saw and I believed. Do you see that? So when he talks about himself, he makes himself better than Peter, the other disciple. So here, even at the resurrection, for criminy sake, even at this seminal moment in history where God is redeeming the world through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, even in this moment, There's envy and competition. So back to today's text. Jesus says to Peter, "Follow me." And Peter says, "Well, what about that guy? What about John?" And Jesus appears to have had enough of this rivalry. I think of my mom when I read this because there were 4 kids in my family, and we were always pounding each other in the station wagon. And I'm sure my mother many times was like, "I have run out of my patience with you all." And Jesus in this text runs out of his patience with Peter. He is unsympathetic. He has had enough, and he says, "If it's my will that he remain, what is that to you? Follow me." What is that to you? I mean, what indeed, right? How can God use us if our focus is on staying number one, getting what's coming to us, being better than the others around us, being in competition with each other? How can God use us if we look around at what everybody has and we think, "I wish I had that house. I wish I had that job. I wish I had that spouse. I wish I had that patience. I wish I had that understanding." Or if we say things like, "Why is this happening to me? I deserve better." Or, "Why does she get that? I sure deserve it more." We have all felt like that. We struggle as a people to be content, don't we? We struggle to be content with what we have. Now, don't get me wrong this morning. I am not talking about that it's a problem if there's friendly competition. Friendly competition can be really good. I know when I have friendly competition with someone, it inspires me. It inspires me to do better. I see someone else, this pastor friend of mine, with his eyes closed, and I thought, I will too keep doing this. I will focus, right? That friendly competition. But when it turns into envy, when it turns into comparisons, when it turns into judgment, when it turns into keeping your mind and your thoughts on other people's business, well, that's when we get into trouble. In our text, Peter's doing that, and Jesus tries to draw his attention back. Because when we're focused on other people, we miss out on ourselves. We miss out on who we are. We miss out on the gifts that God has given to us. So, what about you? Who is it you're focused on these days, thinking you wish you had what they had? An easier life, a better car, a nicer house, you fill in the blank. The problem is that when we focus on other people, we get into all kinds of trouble. And the Bible calls this trouble coveting. So coveting is when you are comparing and jealous and want what other people have so much. And the Bible speaks against coveting. It's actually the 10th commandment in the Bible that we are not to covet. And here's the thing that scholars say about that commandment, is that it's one of those commandments that's kind of different from some of the others, in that you can covet in your heart and nobody knows what you are thinking. Right? Like right now, you could be coveting from somebody else. Like several people said to me after the first service, "I was really coveting your blazer." Right? It's one of those things, like a lot of the things in the 10 Commandments, murder and adultery, people can see that, but coveting is different. It's something that goes on internally, and that's why it can be so dangerous. So Jesus talks about it in Mark's gospel. Let's put that one up for us. And he says, "For from within, out of the heart of humanity, comes evil thoughts, fornication, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness." Now, fornication, theft, murder, and adultery, okay, but coveting, why is that such an issue? I mean, Jesus obviously thinks it's an issue. It's a place where we stumble. It's a place where you and I see what others have, and our attention goes there, because just like envy, when we covet, it pulls apart the contentment that we have in life. It drains us of our joy. It stops us from enjoying what God has given us. And it also stops us from celebrating others when they have wins in their life, because we're so busy thinking, well, why don't I have that? Why isn't it working out for me? They always seem to get the good stuff. One of the meditations we did one night was actually about this, because it's such a human tendency. It was a little guided meditation around growing our heart, kind of like the Grinch, growing our heart, so that we would have more joy for the people around us when good things happen. Because you know how it is. Somebody says, this great thing happened, and you go, great. Not great. Right? Our hearts often need to grow. As I was thinking about all of this week, sitting on my cushion for 10 hours a day, I was thinking, the big issue here is that God created each of us, and that God gave each of us gifts. God didn't give us all the gifts, but God gave us some of the gifts. And the challenge in our life is to see what God gave us and to be thankful for it, instead of to compare it to what others have gotten. When we focus on what we don't have instead of what we do have, we miss out on so much. I don't think there's any substitute for doing that hard work of becoming comfortable in our own skin. You know what I mean? A lot of times we don't accept our own gifts because we're just not comfortable with them. We'd like the gifts of someone more worldly or smart or accomplished or normal. When I was in 5th grade, my cousin came out from New Jersey to spend a couple weeks with us. She's a couple years older than me, and I always have admired her. And I love spending time with her. I learned so much from her in those 2 weeks. And then when she went back to New Jersey, she sent me a gift. I still remember it. It was a T-shirt, and it said the word unique on it. Now, I love that. But it was also a little difficult for me, because it told me that she had seen that I was different from the other cousins. I was different, and I am grateful there was not a T-shirt that said weird. Only one that said unique. I sometimes, and I imagine you do too, struggle to accept our giftedness and only see what we are not. I'm still in the process of learning to appreciate who God made me to be. And maybe you are too. I think it's one of those journeys of our whole life to become comfortable in our own skin so that we can live out of the giftedness that God gave us. So let's go back to that first text. Do you remember it? The first text about Peter and Jesus, where Jesus says, "Do you love me?" I think that this question is so close to Jesus' later response to Peter, "What is that to you?" for a reason. And I think the reason is that ultimately envy diminishes love. Peter could not really love Jesus to his fullest extent if he was so focused and so filled with envy. Envy diminishes love. I don't think you and I can love well. We can't love ourselves. We can't love our neighbor if we're always comparing and judging. So, let's look at now what are some practical things we can do to move into this teaching of Jesus so we can take this insight and live it. And the first thing I want to suggest is forgiveness, to forgive. I think some of us are just wired more in this way to compare ourselves, to judge, to think about things like this. You know, you may find yourself one of those people that you're really super good at comparing and judging and envying people. It's your natural gifting, right? Some of us were born that way, and some of us were raised that way. If that's where you are this morning, just forgive yourself. You know, you're not going to move forward by shaming yourself and saying how you are is wrong. Instead, be honest with yourself and forgive yourself and know that there are ways forward for you, that you don't have to pretend that's not what's going on for you. Second thing is, ask, what is this focus on others stopping me from feeling? So if you're focused on other people, it's often because you don't want to feel your own feelings. So if you're judging them, you can't think about your own sadness or your own grief or your own anger. I felt like when I focus on other people, like this past week, it was about because I was wondering if I was going to measure up. I was wondering if I was going to make it through this retreat. And I was also a little just anxious about it all. And then when I saw other people's cushions, I was also a little angry I didn't have such a nice cushion. Number 3, grow your joy around others' happiness. So I would love to encourage you this week to look for the person in your life who has something good happen. Could be a big thing, could be a little thing. And to celebrate with them. To not say, that's great, but to say, that's great. Let's go out to lunch and celebrate that. That's amazing. Now, some of us are naturally wired this way. I have a girlfriend named Pat, and she's totally wired this way. If anything good ever happens to me, I always call her because she could not be more excited for me about this stuff. Some of us aren't as good about this, right? So I want you to grow your joy around others' happiness by sending a card or an email or a text to say, I see that and how great that is for you. And then the last one is let Jesus' words be your new mantra. So when you find yourself judging people, when you find yourself comparing people, when you find yourself in other people's business rather than your own, you can say this to yourself. What is that to you? Right? So you're going to notice, probably before you get home, you're going to be judging someone or comparing or doing something. Just say in your heart, wow, Nicole, what is that to you that they have a nicer cushion than you have? What is that to you? But here's the thing, my friends. Do not now use this to say to other people in your life. Right? You're going to be sitting with your kids or your spouse, and they're going to compare and complain. Don't say, well, Jesus said, what is that to you? Nobody wants to hear that. Use it for yourself. See what Jesus would do in your heart when you start obsessing about what others have. If you could just say, well, what is that to me anyway? These teachings, all of these teachings of Jesus are so helpful, so practical. They help us live a more abundant life. He knew humankind in our heart, and he had words to say that can make all the difference for us. So my prayer is that today you heard this teaching and that it gave you life. Let us pray.